you ready to finish the film? Because if so, you're in the right place, listening to America's most film school-ass podcast, The Pod People, and that's only kind of a joke. I'm Matisse Van Rossum, and I'm redefining the genre.
I'm Ben Sheets, and I don't know if you guys heard, but I am, for the third year in the row, the #1 salesman for Verizon Wireless, the #1 carrier for ghosts and ghouls. They can go online and check their favorite websites like BooTube and Facebook, and of course check Gmail. And we all know what Gmail stands for.
Ghost mail?
Graven Tick Counters 2 mail.
Oh!
Whoa!
Oh. Hi, I'm Cleveland Mosier, and I'm lost in the back rooms.
Well, unfortunately, we were going to be joined tonight by a guest, our resident Grave Encounters expert, Jans Holstrom, but unfortunately, he had something much more pressing come up very last minute, so he's not with us tonight. But it is important that we start this episode by declaring strongly what Jan stands for, which is that Grave Encounters is real, not the second one, though.
Yes. Well, he is running on a platform. He is running for mayor of Oklahoma on that same platform. So
the Grave Encounters is real, but not the second one platform.
Yes.
So, oh shit. Well, election day was a couple of weeks ago. Damn. Fuck.
He's just starting early.
Oh, okay. He's ready for 2024.
Yeah. That's a really good campaign strategy. Is just being super obnoxious about your platform like as soon as you can.
But that's true. Yeah, that's what most politicians do.
Yeah. Get people exhausted on it early.
Yeah.
Well, really I know that in 2022 I'll be committing voter fraud in the state of Oklahoma by voting for Jans Holstrom of the Grave Encounters is real, but not the second one party.
Yep.
For a graver encounter tomorrow.
I already have my 3,000 ballots ready to go.
Oh yeah.
Sheets.
I'm writing them out by hand right now. Well, we've I think given away what we're talking about tonight. Is Grave Encounters 2. This was Cleveland's pick for the year of the sequel. Maybe our final year of the sequel pick.
Yeah.
I have one pick.
And as one more
on the schedule. Yeah.
But we're talking about Grave Encounters 2, the sequel to Grave Encounters, which we talked about like 2 years ago, I think, almost, which was a found footage horror film created, written, and directed by the Vicious Brothers, Stuart Ortiz and Colin Minahan. They only wrote this one. They didn't direct it. It was directed by John Poliquin, who has not done anything else of note.
Wait, do we have Jans on for the first one?
We sure did.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't think it was 2 years ago.
I think it was. We were still Ben and I were still living in our old apartment. If it wasn't in 2020, then it was in very early 2021. So.
Yeah. I want to say probably that, but it doesn't matter. Semantics.
But it's been a while. It's definitely been a while.
It has.
I have seen Grave Encounters 2 before, but not since like 2012, I want to say, which is when it came out. I remember watching Grave Encounters 1 and 2, I think the same day on Netflix, back in 2012. And I did not really remember this movie at all. And after watching it again, that makes perfect sense, because it's not a very memorable movie.
You know, it kind of reminded me of Blair Witch 2 in some ways.
Well, yeah, I mean, it takes the same. It's better than Blair Witch 2.
Sure.
But it is the same sort of conceit. It's a very meta film, where it's sort of like, oh yeah, this movie Grave Encounters exists in the real world, but what if it was actually real and not just a movie? We're gonna make a documentary to find out, and that's it. And then most of the movie is basically just Grave Encounters 1 again, but kind of more annoying.
Yeah, I mean the characters in general in this one are even more unlikable than the first one. I would
Yes,
say
very much
overall,
so.
to the point where they're pretty annoying. I think the main character especially is annoying. He has this kind of goth Edward Cullen, early Robert Pattinson look to him.
He's got serial killer eyes.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, I mean, this is our protagonists in this one are film students. The main character is like he's that film student who wants to reinvent the horror genre, take horror back to its roots because horror movies these days suck. There's a lot of people like this dude. This is a very familiar dude. Uh,
yeah.
Ben and I went to film school with a lot of people like this dude. Not that many wrong turns could have made me this dude. But he's very very obnoxious. It makes it a difficult character to engage with because he's so fucking annoying.
Were y'all ever messaged by a ghost in film school?
No, I was never messaged by a ghost in film school.
I
Unfortunately,
was sexted by a ghost at one point, but
oh,
I don't want to
word?
talk about that. Yeah, it was pretty ghoulish.
Yeah. Well, it's not a mutual, at least. That's good.
Well,
Was it mutual?
Damn.
well, I don't want to talk about it. Okay,
Yeah.
it was a bad time.
Yeah,
Let's just
we don't
leave
Did
it
it
want to
at
ja-
blur the lines of consent. That's that's important. Well, all right.
Did it
that. Let's
jack
just
you
say it
off?
wasn't Casper the Friendly Ghost.
Oh, but the Holy Ghost?
It was.
Dig. That's a Bootsy Collins joke. Anyway,
It's a ghost full of holes.
did you take a look under their sheet? All right, I'm moving on. Is there a what the fuck were we talking about? Characters.
Yeah, Grave Encounters
right.
too. I'm kind of floundering. I was expecting Jans to sort of lead this discussion since he, like when we recorded the Grave Encounters episode, he was talking about how he was getting ready to interview the Vicious Brothers about Grave Encounters too.
Yeah.
So I was going into this really leaning heavily on letting him talk about that.
Yeah.
Well,
I will say, character-wise, that main character has a foil in his roommate, who's the epitome of stoner character.
Yeah,
He's
I wish he was like the main character. Frankly, I find him to be a lot more enjoyable and entertaining.
He's also obnoxious, yeah. Well, he's
Yeah.
more benign. He's just kind of the dumb stoner character who's behind the camera.
Well, it's funny because like you say he's less obnoxious because you're right. But he's written as the obnoxious one. Like he's supposed to be the character who is like obnoxious and you can't wait to die. But frankly, he's just like such a goofball about it that like you almost like don't hate him for it, you know? Like
I mean,
Yeah,
and
one of the introductory scenes with him is him sexually assaulting his roommate and friend.
well,
And-
yeah, I mean, you know,
that's true. Yeah, at the
about the-
party, he takes pictures of him teabagging him while
Yeah,
he's
well,
passed
kinda
out drunk and
standing
posts it
over
on
with his
Facebook.
balls out. Like I'm not defending it. Like you shouldn't do that. But
I mean, the balls are on his face. He is teabagging him.
yeah, that's not great.
Posting it on Facebook publicly.
Yeah, that's pretty fucked up.
Yeah.
For sure. But I want to fix him. I think I can.
I don't think you can.
But-
He's dead.
It is worth mentioning
Spoilers.
that the actor, is very much still alive and doing and he plays one of the hockey players on Letterkenny, and it was wild seeing him in this because that movie came out like nearly a decade ago, and he hasn't aged a day. He looks the exact same in that movie as he does on Letterkenny. I like that actor, and it was nice seeing him in something else. I feel that way anytime I see anyone from the cast of Letterkenny. They're all fantastic.
One thing I wanted to talk about with that character is his student film that he's creating, because we only get a brief clip of it.
Oh, you mean the main character?
No, the stoner character.
The stoner guy, yeah.
Yeah, he's editing it on his computer, and we get a brief clip, and it's like the weed life in Comic Sans with like bad clip art of marijuana leaves and smoke. I just
Well,
thought that was
we get a very brief scene of him just walking around the college campus, recording, walking up to people, asking if they have marijuana, which is like the most cop way you can go about getting weed, is like walking up to somebody with your fucking phone out recording, be like, "Hey fellow kids, do you have any marijuana so I can get high, please?"
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true.
No, officer.
Total cop energy walking around. Hey guys, you got some weed? But it is a really funny bit. Like I do like, that part of the movie.
Yeah, I will say I'd much rather watch his student film than the student film the main character was making.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
That is, one of my bigger problems with this movie is that I feel like it doesn't have the same kind of sense of humor that the first one does. It feels like a little bit more serious, a little more grave, if you'll allow me that.
Yeah.
But the bit of the protagonist's like student film that we get to see is like one of the main parts where I do feel like that sort of sense of humor that the original has coming through a little bit. Because like when he's drunk at the party, he keeps talking about how he's gonna like redefine the horror genre, and talking about like how much modern horror sucks because it's all like quick cuts and jump scares and CG and not practicals and stuff. Being very snobby, not unlike ourselves at times. But then we see like the film that he's working on, and it's like the hokiest, most generic, shitty, like teen slasher movie you could possibly imagine, with like big nods to like Saw and shit like that. And
Yeah.
I thought that was really great.
No,
Yeah, I love
it's fun.
the scene where the jock character gets killed and he's standing up and his head just falls off, and then after that, one of the crew
then they
members,
call cut.
yeah, one of the crew members asks like, "Why is the dude standing if he's dead with his head cut off?"
Yeah, like if his head's cut off, like he wouldn't still be standing up. It doesn't really like make sense. And the protagonist is just like, "Oh no, man, that'll be a great jump scare. Like everybody's gonna love that." It's like after earlier in the movie he's talking shit about like cheap jump scares, and it's also like not even a jump scare.
I think part of it is a moment ago you said like it's not as like funny. It's more grave than Grave, the original Grave Encounters, and I agree. And it's interesting too because in concept and in some execution, like it feels very much in the spirit of Grave Encounters. And they're pushing for the same thing, and they're doing that same but different bit, right? Like he's also like kind of a fake, like the main character of the original, and but where this one fails and the original succeeds is that the original Grave Encounters is very to the point. They get into the building from the outset. The movie essentially starts with just that brief moment of them talking about finding the footage, and then we're right into it, and they're on the scene, and they're filming their episode of Grave Encounters. Any of the exposition is done already in the story. Like we get to learn who these characters are through their interactions with like the current plot, and it makes it a lot more enjoyable.
It's very no nonsense, and I think what is like really effective about the original one too is that it has a really good sense of humor in the fact that it's like parodying those like Discovery Channel like ghost hunting shows like Ghost Hunters and Ghost Adventures and like Zach Bagans kind of shit, But what makes it interesting is that it starts out with these like very exaggerated, like sort of dumb, goofy characters that are parodying something in real life, and then watching all of that kind of unravel once they get into like the like genuinely haunted, spooky asylum and stuff. Like that's what's really cool about Grave Encounters is like watching that kind of corny facade dissolve into something more raw and sort of real. And this movie doesn't really have that in the same way. Like, you're right that the protagonists are, like, kind of comparable because they're both sort of frauds, but, like, the Lance Preston character in the original is, I think, so much more of an endearing fraud than the obnoxious film bro in this movie is. Like, I don't find this character endearing at all. Like, I think he's just an obnoxious little shit who's like not particularly good to his friends or like the people who are helping him. And
he's like straight up his girlfriend at the time, you know, or the girl that like thinks he's cute, and that was that was kind of a bummer. And you're right, like Lance Preston, the worst thing that he does in the original is there's two things really. One, he bribes the gardener, but even that is funny. And two, like it shows that like he's just kind of desperately trying to make his show happen, right? Even still, it's coming from like a point of like investment and care. Even though like it's a shitty thing to do, but it is pretty funny. And I mean, the gardener's getting paid, right? Like, who cares?
Like he's endearing. He's endearing in the same way that Zach Bagans is endearing. Who's like he's sort of a dumb loser, but like he takes what he's doing very seriously. And there's something like funny and charming about him walking into these like supposedly like famous haunted places and like threatening to beat up the ghosts and being like, come out and fight me, bro. You know, and it's like, I feel like the first Grave Encounters captures that same energy perfectly.
Yep.
That is just like missing from this one. Like it's trying to capture like a different personality type, and I think it does like a decent job of portraying like an obnoxious film student, but the problem is like those type of people aren't fun to watch. They're annoying to be around, you know?
Yeah, and it's like the joke can be that they're annoying, but at the end of the day you still have to like suffer them.
But there's gotta be another character who is like a stand-in for the audience, kind of, who is like rolling their eyes at the shitty, annoying film student sort of pretensions.
Yeah.
A straight man, somebody that the audience can connect with. And that is
the real
missing.
Question is, why can't it be a gay man? You know? Fucked up.
Oh man. Facts. Preach. Go off, King.
I will.
You're so right.
Yeah. Well, and that brings us to the real strong point of this film, and that is it does pick up again when we finally are, spoiler alert, reintroduced to Lance Preston, and they bring him back.
Like, this time around he plays Rickety Cricket.
Yes, that's true. I think we had actually mentioned that on the Grave Encounters episode too, though I had not seen this one yet. He just is Rickety Cricket in this one. So for the listeners, essentially,
like late season Rickety Cricket.
Yeah. For the listeners, they finally track down the asylum.
Takes them way too long to get there in the movie. That's another problem. It takes way too long to get there.
And we have to suffer through these characters the whole time. And there's this whole series of events that I don't really care to fully work through. But they get there, and sure enough, they're trapped inside again. It's just like last time, and
they literally just do Grave Encounters again.
Yeah, they just do Grave Encounters again, and then finally they find Lance Preston, and he has somehow been living within this House of Leaves insane asylum from the spirit realm for the past 10 years, and he looks like Rickety Cricket from the latter end of Always Sunny in Philadelphia, which is just hilarious on every level. It's funny. His wig is like he's very clearly wearing a wig. He's trying to do the emaciated, like Smeagol kind of thing, to show that he's been starved and feasting off of rats. But the actual actor has taken very good care of himself, and he's cut as hell. So he like
in very good shape.
Six pack. He doesn't look like sickly at all,
I was saying it's because he's been running around the asylum on all fours, which really engages your core.
That's
So
right.
that's how he is.
Man,
That's how he's kept. That's how he's kept such tight abs.
That's right. I'm telling you, if I could focus on an exclusively rat-based diet and get abs like that, I'd do it.
Well,
You haven't tried,
it's not
maybe-
just the rats. It's you gotta commit to eating only rats and only running around on all fours like Gollum.
Damn.
If you do those two things, rats are very low fat. It's very lean meat. There's not a whole lot of meat on there. It's like all protein and parasites. So it's very slimming. And then if you just go everywhere on all fours, you're constantly engaging your upper body and your core muscles. And I think you'll find the results are really astonishing.
Yeah.
I think the secret too is the rats have actually been snacking on creatine. So they're just full
creatine
of,
rats, yeah.
Yeah.
The spirit this asylum is like the whole thing is that like it's like a blending, it's like a vortex where like the real world and the spirit world meet. And what they don't tell you actually is that the spirit world is very rich in creatine.
Well, the thing we have to recognize is that Dr. Friedkin, in addition to testing on humans, he was also trying to make rats as swole as possible.
Yes.
That's
So
right.
I
So
never.
he's just been injecting them with creatine and performance enhancing drugs.
Incredible.
Do y'all
No, I
think Dr. Friedkin is? Do y'all think that's a William Friedkin reference? Do you think that's why they did that?
So I wanted to bring
Probably.
this up. I never noticed this in the first Grave Encounters, but in the second, when they refer to him as Dr. Friedkin, they're already like deep in the asylum at this point and running around and like half out of breath and scared. So they always like say it really fast, and to me it sounds like they're saying Dr. Freakin'.
Oh, he's Dr. Freaking Scary.
Yeah, he's
Fucking
Scary. And we never really see him
fucking
in this
nasty
one either.
ghost man.
Yeah, we don't see too much of
What-
Dr. Freakin'.
What do you mean? We
This one,
we
do
we see more of him in this one than we do in the first one. There's the
Really?
whole scene where they're hiding in like the closet while they're watching him and all the ghost nurses sacrifice
yeah.
a baby to Satan.
Yeah,
I guess.
but we see them do that in the original too.
Well,
Yeah,
I mean,
but
he shows up at the
very
very end. At the very end in the original, after he's been mentioned a couple of times, he shows up at the very end and he gives Lance Preston the lobotomy, which he somehow recovered from in this movie.
Yeah.
It's all the
He's had
creatine
10
again.
He's had oh yeah, for sure. He's had 10 years to get over the lobotomy with creatine rats.
Well, yeah, and in this movie, instead of at the very end, it's like 15 minutes before the end.
Yeah, and then they just kind of run away from him and leave that part of the asylum, and then he doesn't show up again after that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It seems like pretty easy to get away from him actually, because like really the nurses just kind of do the scary Grave Encounters face, you know the one, and then they
the
run
scary
away.
wide mouth.
Yeah, the big wide mouth, and then they run away, and those characters don't show up again for the rest of the movie.
In general, what did you guys think of the pacing of this movie? Because that brings up a good question. With
terrible, frankly. I really think the pacing of this movie is bad because it takes them way too long to get to the asylum. Because we've already talked about like how sort of annoying our core cast of characters are for the most part, and there's so much shit with them dicking around with like getting sent YouTube comments by ghosts and whatever that are telling them that Grave Encounters is real, and then going to like the mother of the actor who plays Lance Preston and like trying to interview her, and then the ghost on YouTube telling them to come to the asylum, and they don't get to the asylum.
Well, no, they go to
20 minutes.
The dude goes to LA first to
Oh God,
investigate
yeah,
the random music video.
to ambush the producer who shows up at the beginning of the first Grave Encounters to be like, oh yeah, I'm the producer of Grave Encounters and they disappeared doing this, and he goes and sort of like ambushes him and is wearing like a hidden camera like in one of the buttons on his shirt, and gets the producer to admit like, oh yeah, they never came back from that asylum, but we found the tapes and I was gonna go bankrupt because of such and such, so I decided to release it and pretend it was a movie, and then it was just all fake even though it was actually real. So then our protagonist is like, well, we gotta go to the asylum and we gotta find out what happened. But then when they get there, finally, when they get there, like 40 minutes into the movie, then it just starts doing the same shit that the first Grave Encounters does, but worse. And all the characters are surprised by it for some reason, because they go there under the pretenses that the first Grave Encounters is real, but then when they get into the asylum and find that it like traps them in there and they can't get out, and that there's like ghosts doing the Grave Encounters face at them, they're like, oh my god, I can't believe this is happening.
It's funny, they act like they're so prepared for it. Like they're like, we have glow sticks that we're gonna drop on the ground. We're ready.
Yeah, we're ready. We have glow sticks, and we also brought air horns. So if we get separated, we can toot them and see where other people are. I thought that was kind of funny. And then like one of the times where like one of the girls, like the goth girl, that is one of the like cool like sort of like editing tricks that I like, is when they're like running down the hall and she turns a corner, and then the rest of them turn the corner, and right where she went is just a wall, and then they can like sort of hear like an air horn blowing like way off in the distance. I thought that sequence was kind of well done.
I like everything with the goth girl. I like her kill sequence is all right. You know, when she gets like caught by the ghost and dragged away. Like I like the blood coming out of her eyes and ears, like, and nose. Like that was cool. You know, you get the sense that she was just like pressurized or bodied by this creature.
Yeah.
And I will say, like,
the kills are fine.
Yeah, it's a much better shot sequence than like the guy getting hit by the ghost grenade in the first one. I think that was I was watching it with Ted and Jans and a few of my other coworkers in chat at the top of this week. We did the first and second one back to back, so I got to watch the first one again and kind of recap, which was nice. But yeah, I think that was Ted who referred to it as a ghost grenade in the first movie when the guy gets hit by the weird explosion and flies down the hall, and it looks really cheap. But I will say though that like at least the cheapness is like kind of fun, and it gets a giggle out of me every time. Whereas like this one where she gets like kind of crushed or whatever, it's cool and it is better done, but I don't know if it's much fun though. You know.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't have any attachment to these characters.
No.
Yeah.
So her death. I don't feel anything from her death.
Agreed.
I think back to the scene in like the first Grave Encounters where like the fraud psychic, who's like one of my favorite characters, like the old dude in the leather jacket with like the frosted tips and stuff, like the sequence where like he's lost his flashlight or whatever, and we've got like the static camera like in the hall, and him sort of like feeling his way down the hall in the complete darkness, and then he like gets fucked up by a ghost. Like I like that sequence in the original, and I don't think there's anything in this movie that really feels quite like that. There's a dude who gets thrown out of the window up at the top, which is like, I guess, kind of shocking, I guess. Like it's very abrupt, but
it feels kind of anticlimactic.
I mean, it's just a dude who gets thrown out of a window.
Yeah, because we do see him like on top of the car when they leave the asylum
later. Yeah. Well, when they think they leave the asylum, I will say that is one of the sort of like twists that this film does that I do sort of still enjoy.
Yeah, it's
is
good.
like
I really love that sequence.
The fake.
Mm-hmm.
the fake escape from the asylum. Like they finally find like the door out, and they run out, and they see their friend's body on like the security guard's car after he's fallen from like the top floor. And they get back to their car, and they drive all the way back to the hotel, and they pack up their stuff, and they're getting ready to head back to their city or their college or whatever. And they take the elevator down, and when it gets to the bottom floor, it opens, and it opens onto the underground tunnels in the asylum. I really like that reveal. That's like one of like the clever original things that I think this movie does, because mostly it's just retreading the same ground of the first one, but like that subversion is really nice. I mean, you kind of see it coming because like there's got to be more to the movie at this point, but still, like the reveal of the elevator doors opening, and it's just like those tunnels with like the pipes on the ceiling, very Nightmare on Elm Street kind of, and like the girlfriend's like reaction of like sitting down and them having to like coax her out of the elevator, and her being like, I don't wanna. That stuff's good.
Yeah, and that rolls right into them meeting Ricky Cricket. So
that's when Lance Preston shows up. Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like that whole section of the movie is where it's at its strongest. But that's like what, 20 or 30 minutes in before the end of the movie?
Yeah, probably 30 minutes. It's definitely over an hour in. 30 40 minutes before the end maybe. I agree. It's the strongest part of the movie. It's the part where they feel like they're actually like trying something different, but it comes after so much like retreading of common ground, after also a lot of like really boring preamble at the beginning, like getting to know the characters too.
Yeah.
So it's like at that point, I'm like, okay, this is finally getting interesting, but I have a hard time really caring anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely woken up by the return of Lance Preston.
Yeah,
and they do.
He's fun. He's hamming it up in a nice way.
Oh
yeah.
His little lair where he's been living is pretty fun too, with like all the candles and like his sort of like mad scrawlings on the wall, and the generic like big vent with a fan in it that has a very bright unmotivated light source somewhere on the other side shining through, so it creates interesting shadows.
I love the giant map he has that he's mapping out.
Oh yes. His
panels, because like the place is ever shifting and changing, so his map also is like folds in different ways to reflect.
Yeah.
Awesome.
The only time I'll ever do this, but it's like the Marauders map from Harry Potter.
That is the only time. Drink it up, folks. You're never getting to one of those references.
Drink it up. I'm never gonna make a fucking Harry Potter reference ever again. But it did. The prop did remind me.
Remember the
that.
Which one is that from?
It shows up a few times, but I think it shows up the first time in the third
I think it was
one?
Harry Potter and the Trans Panic.
Oh yes, that classic one that we all remember.
Yeah, well. Enough about J.K. Rowling being a shitty turf now.
But yeah, like it's a map of the asylum. It's a map of the asylum that has like a bunch of different like flaps that you unfold, and it sort of like changes the map, because like through all these years he's been mapping like the shifting patterns of the asylum, like the logic to it, which I do think is another cool sort of like aspect of it. Like when he's sort of like trying to lead them around, and there's the part where they go to like the one door, and he opens it and it's just like a closet, and he closes it and he opens it again and it's just a closet, and they're all like, this is a waste of time, what the fuck are you doing? And then he opens it a third time and it's all of a sudden like a passage to like a different part of the asylum. I thought that was kind of fun.
Yeah, that was
like
fun.
he spent all of these years figuring out the logic of this shifting labyrinth so he can like navigate it. I think that's cool. I wish there had been more of that actually, and that they had introduced it sooner.
Yes.
Get them to the asylum. Get them to the asylum 15 minutes in. Introduce Lance Preston 30 to 45 minutes in, and then have the rest of the movie be that.
Yep.
Yeah, well, it's funny because they introduced that idea, and then none of the characters ever try that again when they get lost or think they're doubling back to where they've been.
They kind of they do like one other kind of fun thing with it where they're like in the bathroom and Lance Preston starts like breaking the wall with like the metal pipe that he's carrying around, and he breaks a hole in it, and the camera guy goes through and he like falls from the ceiling.
Yeah, I thought that was
where they
fun.
do like that spatial shift. That's that, and the one where he like opens the door a couple of times into the closet and then it's a passage. Those are the only times they really do that. And I think there's so much meat there where they could do fun things with that like shifting of space and like navigating this like shifting asylum. But they don't really take advantage of that in a way that they should, I think.
Well,
it's kind of a shame.
I've brought this up a few times before, but it's the same problem that like a lot of modern like requels make. I brought it up very recently with the Halloween trilogy, the new Halloween trilogy, if you can even call it a trilogy, because we're paying homage to the original, and we're bringing in the original characters. We have to both feature them and the new ones with a fairly equal amount of screen time, and unfortunately in this case the new characters suck. Like they're not that fun or
and they also have way more screen time.
Correct, which makes it even worse.
It's not even like equal screen time. Yeah, it's weird cuz like I mean we didn't really talk about it, but like the movie starts with like a series of like YouTube vloggers, at least some of which are real, and I don't know if they got them to do this for the movie specifically or if they just asked them permission to use their videos or whatever, but it's sort of like a montage of like people talking about Grave Encounters and like some people being like, oh, it's so scary, and some people being like, oh, it sucks and the effects are bad and it's the worst movie ever made. And like they spend so much time sort of like playing with that idea where like, yeah, we know we're making a sequel to Grave Encounters and we got to do all the sequel stuff, but it never feels like they actually have anything substantial to say about that, because they really do just do Grave Encounters again. They don't really subvert anything. Other than like sort of like the fake out of them thinking they escaped the asylum and then they actually didn't, there are no real subversions upon the original in this movie. Are there? Like, can y'all think of any?
No, I think it's best when it's just further exploring the fun stuff, and there's just not as much of that as there could have been.
Yeah, I agree with you, but also like, what's the point of making what's the point of making a sort of meta-referential take on your own work that is like acknowledging the opinions of like the real world? What is the point of doing that if you're not trying to either subvert what you've done before or say something about that? You know what I mean? Like
I disagree a little bit here. Once again, I don't think any of the problems with that stuff exist on paper. I think if the protagonists had been more compelling and more fun, that this movie would have been large, and they'd made their way there much sooner. Like skip all the stuff with like the Lance Preston's mom and all that. Like for God, please skip all of those scenes and
who cares?
Reduce the party scene or just cut it. Like or get a little achronological with it, so that we can start with them arriving there and then we can get a little backstory or something. But I do like the idea, the meta narrative here. I like it a lot, actually. Grave Encounters isn't real. They released the movie. It's essentially our world, but oh, it actually is.
But
I
it
think it's
is
all really
real.
fun. And I also, especially on paper, really like the ending. I think that's very fun. The things I don't like have largely been said. Oh, except for one thing, which we touched on a little bit, but the other subversion that you were looking for, is not a good one, but there is another one, and that is the ghost.
Okay.
The ghost messaging them as dark side.
Oh, okay,
Like,
yeah.
that would be a subversion.
Death awaits.
Death
Death
awaits.
awaits.
Yeah, is like, so this person on YouTube is messaging them. They're sending them stuff saying like new footage. They're emailing them new footage or whatever of grave encounters, and they're trying to figure out like, oh,
The
what's going
one
on? Why do we
they're
have
the
to
ones who
kill
put
him?
they're the ones who put the protagonists on the trail that maybe Grave Encounters is actually real. They set them on the course.
Right, and so they get to the asylum and they're doing shit, and they find a spirit board, or it's a fancy Ouija board, and they
It's somebody has drawn a Ouija board on the top on a card table.
yes, it looks good though. It's good practical. It's a good
Sure.
prop. And they play on it, and the Ouija board reveals itself as Tales from the Dark Side 58, or whatever the name is you just said.
Death awaits.
Death awaits. And
It's what's written on the doors of the asylum in the original, and in this
right.
one when they go in, it says death. Somebody has spray painted on the door. Death awaits.
Yes. So Death Awaits reveals themselves to be a ghost on the Ouija board. And then the little
Who has
plank.
been messaging them through the internet, talking to them on YouTube because the ghosts can access YouTube.
It's dumb. It's really
Yeah.
dumb.
I mean, no,
Fun.
you're absolutely right. You're 100% correct. This is one of the film's quote unquote subversions. It's also the dumbest one in the movie.
It is dumb. I think it's kind of fun and silly. I don't really like what that does to like the asylum's like House of Leavesy in between dimensions deep lore or whatever. Like, it doesn't really fit. It doesn't really mesh to me. I also don't really care because it's Grave Encounters.
Well,
but
what it tries to do, and what the film does sort of try to do throughout, is that it tries to turn the asylum into the Overlook Hotel from The Shining. It tries to make the setting itself an entity that has a will of its own. And while I have always thought that that's a cool idea in principle, and it's one of the things I like about The Shining, both the film and the book, I feel like it's so clumsy in this movie that it doesn't feel as impactful or spooky as it should.
I have a comparison here. Now it's a bit stupid, so bear with me. And this will lead into like the end of the movie in a nice way. But I really like modern scary Godzilla. I really like Godzilla when Godzilla is like properly scary and we barely see them coming in out of the dark, and they're a giant lizard, and you really feel.
You haven't even seen Shin Godzilla yet.
I haven't even seen Shin Godzilla yet, but that's already.
You're gonna love that, fam.
I have been saving that one for a special night. I'm really looking forward to watching Shin Godzilla, and
we should do that. We should do that in
love,
2023
like
for the
properly
podcast.
Scary,
sure.
like properly scary kaiju movies are awesome to me. And then I also really, really love when it's just a campy guy in a rubber suit. I could watch that all day equally. I love them both for very different reasons. Now, the reason I bring that up is because it's the same thing executed very differently, and I like both. And I think that comparison for me holds for Grave Encounters versus The Shining as well. Because they're both trying to do astral realm stuck between two worlds. The building is alive and is its own thing, and it's haunted by ghosts. One is doing it like with aplomb and very classy and literary and scary, and it's Stanley Kubrick and Stephen King, and it's great and it's fun. And then this is the rubber suit version, in my eyes. Like, and so while they are trying to do the same thing, they're also not. And like, I think that there's plenty of room for both to exist, and I love them both for very different reasons.
Sure, but the big problem with this one is we just don't get enough of that.
Sure.
You know,
Well, I'd say the big problem with this one, in going off of your own metaphor, is that while I get what you're saying, the fact is that in this movie there's not a rubber suit. Like, I know that's like
Well,
that
here's my
you're not
equivalent.
being literal, that you're not being literal here, but the charm of those Godzilla movies is that there's literally a dude in a rubber suit, and
Yes.
it's fun.
Well,
And
so,
it's
okay,
like
the
this is
factor.
just the dumber version of The Shining without the fun camp. It's just less well developed. I would say there's kind of like a fun campy element with like the entity that is the asylum, like picking up all of the cameras.
Yeah, exactly.
And
That's
like
campy as shit. That's where I was going
like
with that.
and that like do it, and like the ghost is doing the filming or whatever.
Yeah.
But man, there's not enough of that. And also just like so late into the movie, like it just feels kind of dumb.
Well, I like, there's that. There's also
I like it on paper,
the
but
giant vortex that shows up on the wall that
that sucks.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
the CG vortex, the CG the
Great. I
astral
love it.
butthole,
Yeah,
the
I love
astral
it.
butthole that
There-
sucks
there's-
up Lance
there's
Preston.
certainly a camp element to that, as well as even the red door, near the end. But the thing is, like, I don't think it's played campy enough to differentiate itself from being just bad CG or bad effects work.
The strange thing is that, like, the original Grave Encounters, I think, is an absolutely fantastic balance of camp and horror. I think it really, really walks that line very, very well. And I think this movie sort of plays at that, but it doesn't do a good job of the camp or the horror. I can't quite put my finger on like where exactly it misses either of those. I think it maybe misses the horror because it's just literally redoing everything that the first Grave Encounters does, so it's no longer novel, like we've seen it before. And
I
maybe
think
it
the
fails
camp
at
element-
camp because it doesn't lean hard enough into it. I don't know.
I think the camp element is also a problem of pacing, right? Like, because
Yes.
the part of the reason it works in the first Grave Encounters is it feels like a haunted house ride, right? Like you're going through, and consistently throughout the movie, you're getting kind of scary moments. And with this one, things don't
You're
get
discovering the
rolling.
rules. You're discovering the rules as you go too.
Yeah. In this one, the whole thing doesn't get rolling until like halfway through. And by that point, they have to rush into what they're doing, and they don't have enough time to really emphasize the camp amusement park ride sort of vibe to it.
And also, having seen the original Grave Encounters, you already know the rules. I don't think there's any like new rules of the environment or of the monster, so to speak, really introduced in this movie. Like, we kind of get some of its motivations in that, like, it wants to use these tapes, these films, to try to draw more people to it. More people like this who think that, oh yeah, we got to go to the asylum to see if it's really real or not, to create that intrigue. And it's like, that's kind of interesting on paper. Again, I don't think it's particularly well handled in the movie, but also like that's not like a rule of the monster or the environment. It's sort of like a motivation, but it's like once you go into this movie, it's like, like, okay, when you're in the asylum, like time and space don't work the same. There's ghosts all over the place who make the Grave Encounters face at you and will kill you. And, it's always nighttime and you can't get out. We know this. And the movie This movie doesn't do anything to subvert that. It's just more of that we've
It does
already
very
seen.
little to subvert that. I think, again, one of the most successful scenes is when they think they escape to the hotel
Yeah,
and
right.
the
Yes.
elevator opens, because it feels like a true subversion. It feels like the kind of imagined rules is if you escape, you're, out, and
Yeah, it does.
suddenly that's pulled out from under you.
You're right. It does feel like a greater extension of the powers of this place. That it can go so far as to trick you into thinking that you're leaving and getting in your car, and when they turn on the car, like it's playing the CD or the music that they had playing already. And you can get all the way back to the hotel and like pack up all of your stuff. Like that does sort of feel like an extension of the powers of this place that we've seen from the first one. We didn't know that it can go so far. But again, that's such, in the grand scheme of things, that's such like a small part of this movie.
Yeah.
And that's why it feels like that part feels like it's probably my favorite part of this whole movie, because it's the only like I think really interesting kind of subversive part of the whole thing that doesn't just feel like by the numbers, which the rest of the movie does.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, I think there's enough camp in it for me to be like at least relatively satisfied. Not enough to like maybe like fucking stand and clap or anything, but like I like what's there.
I like the big goblin man that chases them when
Yeah,
they're
especially
out
like
of the
out
out of the asylum when they think that they're escaping the first time. The big goblin
What did
man
y'all
that's chasing.
what did y'all think of the effects in general in this movie?
When they're good, they're great. When they're bad, they're funny, and it's solid. Yeah.
I would say the effects are similar to the first one in terms of technical proficiency, but they push them farther in this one in ways that show the shortcomings.
Yeah, and also like
more
they don't,
apparently,
because of the pacing, they don't have the same weight that they do in the first movie. Like there are
like the like
original that are pretty like actually chilling.
yeah, like the grave encounters face with the big stretchy spooky mouth. Like that effect is practically identical in this one to what we saw in the original. They use it way more heavily in this one. So you get to see a little bit more. Like as an effect, like it's brief enough that like especially for when both of these movies came out, like it's pretty good. I'm fine with it. But then this movie also does shit like we already mentioned, like the big ghost butthole that appears in the wall and sucks up Lance Preston at the end, and like the shot of like all of the cameras like floating up out of the bag and around him, and it's like that stuff looks pretty bad. Like I don't think that it's any worse than the effects, the quality of the effects in the original, but they're just doing more with it, so it's more apparent.
I feel like there were more misses than hits in terms of VFX in this movie, which is a bummer because I think the first one, while it definitely had some misses in terms of effects, it did have some really creative, solid stuff. I think at a higher clip than this one.
Well, I mean, I think the thing about the first one is that they didn't overdo it. They knew like when to use their effects. And like this movie does have some clever like practical editing tricks. Like I already talked about, like when the goth girl like gets separated from them. Another one that I think of that I like pretty well as an effect is like at the end when our shitty protagonist is like beating his girlfriend to death with the camera, and the astute eye can tell that like when like the lens like hits her face and cracks, that's where they're like putting the cuts to like apply additional makeup to her face to make her look more like brutalized and beaten. But the overall effect, I think, is pretty well done. It's it's pretty unsettling. It's not particularly pleasant to watch, as it shouldn't be. And the actress does a good job. The practical effects, the makeup of like what they do to her face is good. Like that, in those instances, I like it. Like I as usual, and sort of like our obnoxious, pretentious protagonist in this movie is like, I do really appreciate when they do these sort of like practical tricks with like editing to like change your sense of space and stuff like that, and to hide clever cuts. I think that works much better than the CG, which this movie rags on a lot. The protagonist rags on a lot, but this movie also leans pretty heavily on CG. There's a lot of it in this movie, and not very good CG at that.
One of the things that kind of dings some of the effects in this movie is they keep showing clips of the first movie in this one, and the clips they show have better effects for the most part.
Bro, that's like, how often have we said that on this podcast? Is like, don't show fucking clips of better movies that came before. Like, don't do that. Don't invite those direct comparisons. Halloween Ends did it too. I think that's the last time we talked about it, but it's not the only time we've talked about it. Is like, why go out of your way to remind your audience of better films?
Oh no,
I don't understand.
We made
I
the
don't
joke
understand that impulse.
recently, because they're watching Abbott and Costello on.
Oh yeah, in the Munsters just last week. Yeah, they're watching a lot of better. Man, that just goes to show how hard my brain has like tried to block those memories already. It was only a week ago, but I'm like trying desperately, subconsciously, to not remember the Munsters.
Such a bad movie. Hey, Tease. While we're talking about the Munsters, and Ben, what's a worse movie
than the Munsters?
Yeah.
Meet the Spartans.
Yeah, maybe. I haven't seen that since I was probably 13, so I can't really remember for sure.
Yeah,
I don't know, man. Like, it's probably...
It's up there.
It's probably because it's so fresh, but The Munsters is one of the worst movies I've ever seen. Like, I struggle.
I asked because I don't have an answer. Like, I can't think of one.
If you give me long enough to think about it, I probably could come up with something.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly in recent memory, and of the films we've talked about on the podcast, like, it is definitely the worst.
I'm haunted by how shitty that movie was. Like,
I
think about it a lot.
There's a few movies I think that I've seen that are worse. Like The Haunting of Sharon Tate is definitely worse.
I think both of y'all will like willingly subject yourselves to worse movies than I do on a more regular basis.
But even still, I can't. Like, at least usually those movies are trying to have a good time.
I willfully subject myself to like the most boring mid-ass movies you've ever seen, like, all the time, which is maybe arguably worse than subjecting yourself to like truly terrible movies. I'm the type of motherfucker who will put on the most generic fucking bullshit that you scroll past on Netflix just to have something on.
No, well, that's the thing, is I do that too. Like, there's no winning. Like, dude, I was talking to Ben about this. Is I kind of long for the days when you were just watching something because it was on. Where, like,
the cable days.
Yeah,
where you didn't, like, I didn't grow up with cable, but like I had like 10 channels on television, so my options were like even more limited. You too, Tease. Like, like,
same. I also didn't grow up with cable. Yeah, it's like, oh well, I want to watch something, and this is on. That is truly like a different time. Like, I think of like being a kid and like the shit my mom and I watched on like basic network television because we didn't have cable. We were like fully into like American Idol and like So You Think You Can Dance and shit like that. Like, we'd fucking because it's what was on. Survivor, bro. Like, and the kind of shit where all that shit where we'd call in our votes every week, you know, where you dial the specific number and press such and such to vote for so and so. It was all that and fucking Seinfeld reruns.
Yeah.
It's like
And-
that's...
I mean, one of my favorite features of Shudder is they just have like that live TV.
Yeah, they just have a
feature.
live streaming channel, which is fucking awesome. It's like you can just put it on. It's like I don't really care what I'm watching. There's just something that is on right now. It's a nostalgic throwback. It is absolutely one of the coolest features of Shudder. Also a great way to like see stuff that you would probably never watch otherwise just because it's on, you know?
Yep.
Yeah.
There's no algorithm like trying to queue up exactly what I would want to watch. There's no sense of there's no like moment where I have to sit down and pick and decide amongst like the massive wall of content out there. Like you just sit down and it's playing and you watch it, and like
Yeah.
like amongst all of the mediocrity that you have to filter through in that, there's a joy and a beauty in finding something you weren't seeking too. And
Yeah,
like,
totally.
yeah, and I think that like you can hit some real gems just by just being like, yeah, let's see, why not? Fuck it.
It definitely, yeah, it reminds me of like going to friends' houses as a kid and just having the Sci-Fi channel on and watching like a lot of those like old fucking mid 2000s sci-fi original movies that are like really terrible but also like uniquely kind of charming. Like there's a couple of those movies that I still have like actively living in my head that I fucking saw on Sci-Fi Channel that I never would have fucking watched otherwise. They're not good movies, but have like left and have been like impactful enough from like discovering them on Sci-Fi that I still remember them.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think the fact that we have strayed so far from talking about Grave Encounters 2 just goes to show that we don't have anything else to say about this movie. So shall we rate?
Yeah.
Yeah, we might as well.
Well, Cleveland, this was your pick, so we'll let you do the honors and start us off.
Yeah, I would say this is a fairly easy 3. I like the good. I'm willing to rate it a little bit higher for the good. I think a 2.5 is also fine. Or even a 2. Like I'm not super worried about it, but I'll be a little generous on this one and give it a 3. The stuff I like about this movie, I do particularly like, and I do want to note too that I really love how at the end of the movie, the producer like looks at the camera and he says, "I want to do what I regrettably didn't do last time and say that none of this movie is real." And then we have the protagonist kind of nod along with that, with this like haunted look in their eye, implying that it all is. And I think that's fun. I think that's neat. Not enough to rate higher than 3, but like again, the rickety cricket stuff, the corniness is good. I do wish there was more of it, of course. But what's there is enough to satisfy.
Ben, where are you at?
Yeah, this movie was pretty disappointing. I had to go back and see what I rated the first one. I give that one a 2.5, and this one is definitely worse than the first one, so I'm gonna give this one a 2. I think in retrospect, I probably would bump Grave Encounters 1 to a 3 in comparison. But
Yeah, I forgot you'd given the original Grave Encounter such a low score. I feel like I gave it. I need to double check, but I feel like I gave it like a 4 or something like that, or at least a 3.5.
Probably a 4.
Because I like the first Grave Encounters, but anyway, in regards to this one, I'm gonna give it the 2.5 out of 5. I'll split the difference with you guys. Like, it's not a miserable watch, but I struggle to come up with any good reason to watch it over the original Grave Encounters, because like it really doesn't bring anything new and interesting to the table. I don't think. Like it has a couple of like good sequences and some interesting stuff, but yeah, it's really pretty middle of the road for me. I would definitely say just watch the first one. You'll get everything you need to out of it. So that'll give Grave Encounters 2 an average of 2.5 out of 5. This one falls pretty squarely into see it or don't. It's up to you, dear listener. Ben, what's next week?
Next week, we are covering a new movie. It is Bones and All.
Oh, the new Luca Guadagnino.
It looks like a movie that'll have a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Why are we covering that and not the chef or the table or whatever that one's called?
Because we fucking predicted it, you dork.
Well,
honestly, I think Bones and All looks pretty good. I'm pretty excited about it.
I don't know anything about it. I don't know who those names are. I'll just find
out. The new Suspiria.
The Suspiria remake.
Oh, I did. Well, I did like that movie.
And Call Me by Your Name. It's that Luca Guadagnino, and it's a cannibal movie,
well,
which
Cleveland,
I'm very partial to.
I think that sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
I called you by my name. There, that was the joke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tease. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Next week, Bones and All. We hope you'll be there with us with all of your bones.
You know, if they make a sequel to the movie, will they call it Bones and All and some more bones?
Bones and All,
yeah,
and
maybe.
then some.
More bones.
And more bones. All right. Well, the bones are their dollars. Hey, well, thanks. That makes our outro music easy for me. I was curious. I didn't know what I was gonna do for this one, but
yeah, Grave Encounters too. Perfect.
Yeah, you might want to save that for next week.
No, next week I'll use something from the metal band Bone All, AWL.
Excellent.
But well, since we're remote tonight, no sponsor, so we'll just fucking wrap it up. Leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Support us on Patreon, patreon.com/podpeoplepod.
Yeah, you're the sponsor this week, dear listener.
Yeah, you're the sponsor. The honorary pod boy
by listeners like you.
The honorary Podboy tier gives you access to our Discord channel, so you can subscribe at that level and come hang out with us and talk about movies and dumb stuff. Shout out to our honorary Podboys, Sam Simon and Zach Confer. If you want your name added to that list, patreon.com/podpeoplepod. There is a continuingly real possibility.
I like continually.
A continuingly real possibility that Twitter will not exist by the time this episode comes out. But if it still does, we are on Twitter at PodPeoplePod and at letterboxd.com/PodPeoplePod, where you'll find a list of all the films we've talked about on the show with our average ratings and links to those reviews. I am
continualingus on your ear.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. It's awful.
I am maybe on Twitter at SomeSpookySnake and also twitch.tv/SomeSpookySnake for monthly Spooky Saturday streams.
I'm on Letterboxd. I'm going to change my username soon. So just follow the Pod People Letterboxd and I'll put something on there about it.
Giving up on Twitter.
Do it. Yep.
It'll be gone in a week. By this time, it'll probably be gone.
Maybe.
We'll see.
Who knows? Anyway, what I know is that you can find a lot of the cool stuff I'm working on dreadxp.com. There's just so many cool fucking games happening. As of this recording, Mirror Forge will be soon to be out, if not out. So go check out Mirror Forge. I did some art for that. The developer, Mist of Dev, is a wonderful person, and you should support their game. Super fun and scary.
All right. Well, that'll do it for us this week. Grave Encounters is real, but not the second one.
The horses they were neighing, the day Robert Palin shot me down.
Follow my lead in G.
He rode into town on a jet black mare, spat and hitched her to a tree. He made his way to the town saloon the day Robert Palin's murdered me.
It was also the night that the skeletons came to life. They came from under the ground and from all over the...
Palins grabbed the preacher's daughter. He aimed to shoot her at my crown. He cocked that crooked hammer back and he brought that hammer down.
Exactly, the bones are the skeleton's money. In our world, bones equal dollars. That's why they're coming out tonight to get their bones from you. The skeletons will pull your hair up, but not out. All they want's another chance at life. They've never seen so much food as this. Undergrounders have as much food as this. And the worms are their money. The bones are their dollars. And
the bullet ripped inside my chest. The clouds, they did storm. My sweet Marie, she cried for me, and then I was no more.
And it was also the night that the skeletons came to life. The bones are their money. So are the worms. They pull your hair up, but not out, to turn into a man and have another chance at life. But if they pull it out, they turn to bones. Yes!